Okay, so you know how much we love talking about sailboats, right?
Right.
And we talk a lot about like the sails
Yeah.
and the rigging and like the fancy new electronics,
Yeah.
but we don't always spend enough time on the engine,
Right.
which is kind of a shame because
Yeah.
the engine is kind of important.
Pretty important.
Yeah.
Especially when the wind
Yeah,
guides.
exactly. That's actually a really good point. It's like you could have the most beautiful sails in the world
Yeah.
and all the bells and whistles, but if your engine conks out,
Yeah.
you're kind of stuck.
You're not going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So today we are diving deep
Yeah.
into the often overlooked
Right.
but totally crucial world of sailboat engines.
That's right. And specifically, we're going to give you the knowledge you need to confidently inspect a used sailboat engine, because that can be a daunting task.
Oh, yeah, especially if you're not a mechanic,
Right.
which most of us aren't.
Most of us aren't. But the good news is you don't have to be a mechanic to spot the signs of a well-maintained engine versus one that might give you trouble down the road.
Totally. So much of it is, like you said, just knowing what to look for.
Exactly. And it starts with trusting your gut.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. Trust your gut. So we're walking up to this used sailboat. What's the first thing we're doing?
We're going to pop open that engine compartment.
All right, engine compartment open. What are we looking for?
The first thing you'll notice is the overall appearance. Is it clean?
Okay.
Is it organized?
Right.
Can you actually see the engine?
Okay, so a clean engine room equals a happy boat owner. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
A clean and organized engine compartment tells you the owner cares about maintenance, and that's a good sign.
That makes sense. It's like if you walk into someone's house and it's a total mess, you're not going to assume they're great at home maintenance, right?
Exactly. Now, while you're looking around, check if the owner has any spare parts handy.
Okay, so a clean engine room equals a happy boat owner. What kind of essentials should we find in a well-stocked engine compartment? You know, the stuff that screams, this owner is prepared for anything.
You want to see things like oil and fuel filters, a spare water pump impeller. It's a small part, but crucial for cooling the engine, and a spare belt, of course. These are like the essential items in your engine's first aid kit. Finding them neatly stored is a really good sign.
It's like finding a car with a meticulously organized toolbox. You know, the owner is on top of things. But let's be honest, not all engine compartments are going to be sparkling clean. What are some of those red flags that should make us raise an eyebrow?
One of the first things to check is the cylinder head gasket.
Cylinder head gasket.
This part keeps the engine's oil and coolant separate.
Okay.
You don't want them mixing. See any drips, streaks, or sealant goop around the head gasket.
Got it.
That's a sign of a leak or a previous repair, and it's something you want to investigate further.
Leaky engine, probably not a good sign. So we've talked about the overall look of the engine compartment and what that tells us about the owner. But now let's get our hands a little dirty, shall we?
Let's do it.
Let's talk about oil. All right, so we're looking at the engine, we're looking at all the parts, we're looking for spare parts.
Right.
What about the oil?
Ah, the oil. The oil is like the lifeblood of the engine.
Okay.
It's the best way to get a feel for the engine's overall health.
So how do we check it?
First things first, you want to make sure you're checking the oil with the engine cold.
Okay.
So if the boat's been running, give it some time to cool down.
Got it. Cold engine, then what?
All right, now you're going to locate the dipstick.
The dipstick. Okay.
It's usually a brightly colored handle, often yellow or orange, sticking out of the engine block.
Okay, found it.
Pull it out, wipe it clean with a rag or paper towel, and then reinsert it all the way in.
Okay.
Now pull it out again and take a look.
All right, got my dipstick. It's got oil on it. What am I looking for?
You want to see the oil level between the two marks on the dipstick, usually a high and a low mark.
Okay.
If it's below the low mark, the engine could use an oil change.
Okay, makes sense. What if it's above the high mark? Is that bad?
Too high can be bad news. It could mean coolant leaking into the oil,
Right.
or even a problem with the head gasket, which, remember, we talked about that earlier.
Right. Leaky head gasket, not good.
Not good at all.
Okay, so we've checked the oil level. What else can the oil tell us?
The oil's appearance can reveal a lot about what's going on inside the engine. Fresh oil is usually a translucent honey color.
Okay.
But if you see milky, kind of a tan color, almost like a cafe au lait,
Okay.
that means there's probably water in the oil.
Oh, no. So that means head gasket again?
Could be, or it could be something else. But definitely a sign to investigate further.
Okay. And just to be clear, we don't want any water in our oil, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Oil and water don't mix, just like your mama always said.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another thing to check is the oil's texture.
Okay, how do we do that?
Dip your finger in the oil and give it a rub.
We're getting up close and personal with this engine, huh?
It's the best way to know, for sure. It should feel slick between your fingers,
Okay.
but it feels gritty, like there's sand in it. That means there are metal shavings in the oil, which is a sign of wear and tear inside the engine.
So, slick good, gritty bad. Got it.
Exactly. And finally, don't forget to give the oil a sniff.
A sniff? You're serious?
Trust me on this one. Fresh oil has a kind of sweet smell.
Okay.
But if it smells burnt, that's a sign the engine's been running too hot or the oil is overdue for a change. And that means potential problems down the road.
Okay, this is fascinating. I never realized how much you can tell about an engine just by looking at the oil.
It's pretty amazing what you can learn just by using your senses.
Yeah.
But we're not done yet. We've covered the oil, but there are other parts of the engine that can tell us a lot about its condition.
Okay, like what? Where do we go from here? So we've checked the oil, looked good, smelled okay, I think. Now we're moving on to the rest of the engine, right?
Exactly. The oil can tell you a lot, but we're not done with our engine inspection just yet. Remember that sea trial we talked about?
Oh yeah, the moment of truth.
Right. Now's the time to see how this engine performs in its natural habitat out on the water.
Okay, so engine on, we're heading out. What's the first thing we should be paying attention to?
Well, before you even put the engine in gear, let's just listen to it for a moment.
Listen for what?
Just listen to how it sounds. Does it start easily?
Okay.
Does it settle into a nice, smooth idle?
Okay.
Or is it sputtering, shaking, or struggling to stay alive?
All right, so we want a nice smooth idle, not a sputtering, shaking mess. Got it. What else should we be listening for?
Pay attention to any unusual noises. A little bit of ticking is normal, especially in older engines, but loud knocking or banging sounds are a big no-no.
Loud knocking or banging, that's never a good sign, no matter what you're talking about.
Okay, so we've listened to the engine at idle. What's next?
Time to put it in gear and see what she's got.
Okay, we're moving.
Yeah.
What should we be looking out for now?
As you increase the RPMs, pay attention how the engine responds. Does it accelerate smoothly?
Okay.
Or does it hesitate or struggle to reach higher speeds? Okay, got it. So smooth acceleration is what we're looking for. And I'm guessing we should keep an eye on the gauges too, right?
Absolutely. Keep a close eye on the temperature gauge. It should rise to a normal operating temperature and then stay there.
Okay.
If it starts creeping up, especially as you increase the engine load, that's a sign of a cooling system problem. And that's something you want to address sooner rather than later.
Right, overheating is bad. Got it. What about those other gauges, oil pressure, RPMs? What should we be looking for there?
The oil pressure should be nice and steady,
Hmm.
and those RPMs should match up with the engine speed. You're feeling no weird fluctuations or jumps. And speaking of fluids, don't forget about that transmission fluid check we talked about.
Right, the transmission fluid, I almost forgot.
It's easy to overlook, but it's an important one. Remember, you're looking for clean fluid, free of any metallic particles or discoloration.
Got it. Clean fluid, just like with the oil. So we've been out on the water, we've put the engine through its paces, everything's looking good. What's next?
Well, if you've made it this far and the engine is still humming along happily, that's a great sign. But before you sign on the dotted line, there's one more thing we need to talk about: maintenance records.
Yes, the paper trail.
Exactly. Think of it like a used car's service history. You want to see evidence that the previous owner has been taking good care of the engine. Ask to see invoices for oil changes, repairs, winterization, anything and everything engine related.
So a well-documented engine is a happy engine. Makes sense. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from that initial visual inspection to the sea trial and those all-important maintenance records. Before we wrap up, any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Buying a used sailboat is a big decision, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Arm yourself with knowledge, ask the right questions, trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to walk away if something doesn't feel right. There's a perfect sailboat out there for everyone happy hunting.
I love that happy hunting. And remember, folks, whether you're a seasoned sailor or just starting out, the most important thing is to get out there, enjoy the journey, and always remember to be safe. Until next time, happy sailing.